Moriah Wilson had her whole life ahead of her when it was taken way too soon. She was one of the best young bike racers in the country. So how did she end up dead in an Austin, Texas apartment? Was it a love triangle gone wrong? Why did her killer escape if she was innocent? Welcome back to the TCL podcast. My name is Breezy. I don't know what that sound is, but anyway. And here we talk murder and other forms of crime. I do have a YouTube channel that you can go check out as well. I also have a Patreon that you can join. And by joining, you'll receive early access to scheduled episodes that are set to come out. I also have a merch shop that you can go buy something from. For any updates on my channel and podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Now that I have all that out of the way, let's dive into why you clicked on this episode. Today, we're going to be doing a TCL special that I have been wanting to talk about ever since it came out. I'm super excited to talk about this case. One, because I first came across this case on Dateline, and I got so intrigued with it that I knew once she was sentenced or once she went to trial, I could actually talk about this case more. So now that she's been found guilty, I'm going to be talking about this case. So, let's get started with Colin Strickland. He was believed that every woman should own a gun. It was a feminist conviction of a sort. He would sort of argue as a dude, a tall, tan, strapping young lad. He enjoyed a freedom that many women don't. He could go most places, do most things without feeling threatened. He rode his bike in a desolate gravel roads, then parked his truck wherever he liked and slept like a Spartan, inside a Spartan trailer he hauled behind him. As a professional bike racer, he lived a remarkable carefree life, close to the best he could have imagined for himself. But he was aware of his privilege as well. Strickland's girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong, called him one night in the summer of 2020, sobbing in panic. Belligerent. He was probably maybe slightly intoxicated and suffering from some kind of mental breakdown, or maybe both. He kept banging on the door of her apartment, Austin, Texas apartment, and but he eventually went away. But the incident terrified her. The guy who was knocking on the door, but eventually terrified her. Another time, she was accosted by an angry man in the grocery store parking lot. Now and then, all creeps followed her while she rode on the bike paths, and made her feel unsafe. Strickland could only imagine how these incidents felt to Armstrong, a little yoga instructor with auburn hair that fell across her shoulders. He knew that men commit nearly 8% of violent crimes in the U.S., and he wondered, why would a woman spend her life living in fear? Maybe a gun would make Caitlin feel empowered, more independent, and feel free to live the way she chooses. Now, believe it or not, it's very easy to buy a weapon in Texas. So, beginning of 2022, he and Armstrong rode their bikes to McBride's, a family-owned gun shop near UT. Armstrong picked out a 9mm 6 Cyros P365 pistol and held it where it could get a feel for the weight. Strickland picked out a handgun too. As a kid, he lived in a rural hill county west of Austin with lots of firearms, but his family didn't own guns. He owned a shotgun maybe once in his life. The motivation to buy one came from his fascination with machines that he was drawn to the engineering and construction. In their relationship, who once worked at the finance, managed the money while Strickland often paid for things. After providing the background information required by federal law for licensed gun dealers, he asked the salesperson if they needed to have Armstrong's information too. No, he was told. In the state of Texas, you can gift someone a gun. Probably not the best thing to do, but, you know, what more can you do, right? Well, Strickland paid for the pistols and gave one to Armstrong. They also had acquired 2 boxes of ammunition, one for practice and another marked 9mm Jag, a bullet designed to break apart the impact and cause additional harm inside the body, increasing the chances that it will kill the intended target. Keep that in mind. So, on a warm spring day, it was nothing like going for a swim in Austin's Deep Eddy Pool, an oasis stone thrown from the downtown skyscrapers. Deep Eddy is one of the oldest swimming pools in Texas, and families were in the shallow and 20-somethings lounge in the grassy areas with white half-dressed old-time jaws in their bathhouse. A stately building made of limestone cut by WPA workers during the Depression. So, at dusk on May 11, 2023, fireflies flashed as 25-year-old Moriah Wilson immersed herself from the water and swam. That afternoon, Wilson was a professional cyclist and she had logged a few hours alone on the wind-blown roads northeast of Austin. Before flying in, she messaged her friend Colin to say she was coming to town, was he up for a ride? Strickland and Wilson had a somewhat complicated relationship, though they met a year earlier at a 4-day gravel race in Idaho. In fall of 2021, when Strickland was in the middle of a breakup with Armstrong that lasted a few months, he and Wilson connected romantically. They were intimate for a while, and while she was visiting Austin, later after Strickland resumed their relationship with Armstrong, he and Wilson went back to being friends. Strickland knew his local cycling opportunities couldn't compare with Vermont, where Moriah grew up, or San Francisco, where she cut her teeth as a bike racer. But he wanted to show her why everyone says Austin is such a fun place, and invited her to go to Deep Eddy for a swim. After a dentist appointment that afternoon, he picked up Wilson on his BMW motorcycle around 6 p.m. and then they rode down to the pool. Wilson, whose friends called her Mo, was relatively new and distinctly American. She was to distinctly American discipline of gravel racing. Off-road events where pros get a start alongside weekend warriors in the big pack. But over the past year, the Dartmouth graduate and former downhill ski racer had dominated nearly every event she entered. She recently left a job at the bike company specialized where she worked as a demand planner. Tracking supply chains and forecasting sales. She wanted to race full time, and she came to Texas to complete the Gravel Locos, a 155-mile race from the Rocky Hill Cemetery. As Wilson climbed from the pool, water dripped off of her, and she wrapped a towel around her. At 35, Strickland was a decade older than Wilson, but he could relate to her path. 10 years prior, he had made a similar decision to refocus his life, leaving a steady environmental consulting job and dedicating his life to bike racing. The change had worked out. In 2019, he won the world's most prestigious gravel race, Unbound, and this was a 200-mile grind race across the Flint Hills of eastern Kansas. He became an icon to the American cycling scene, sponsored by the bike's top industries, including Rafa, Specialized in Wahoo, and was more mainstream like Red Bull, and even with Red Bull. Now, by the pool, Strickland and Wilson talked about the social relevance of doing biking for a living. Wilson had just started a grand adventure, whereas Strickland saw his pro cycling journey coming to an end. Both of them enjoyed swimming, winning bike races, but They sure are uncertain. Mm. And Wilson was wondering, how can I inspire people, give back to the sport, and make it more inclusive? Strickland thought about hundreds of messages he received from the fans who was captivated by his story over his years. That he forged his own path and stayed true to himself. He told Wilson, "You can motivate people to live a healthier life." As the sun started to go down, Wilson and Strickland left Deep Eddy and went to Pool Burger, a patio bar where they ordered food and rum cocktails. Strickland's phone buzzed, and he looked down at the screen and thought it was Armstrong calling. He knew she wouldn't like him hanging out with Wilson. Their romantic relationship was brief and painful for her. Before going out to Deep Eddy, he changed Wilson's name in her phone. This was really dumb for him, right? Yeah, exactly. But he didn't want his girlfriend to see Wilson's text and get upset. At the bar, he didn't answer Armstrong's call. Later, he wished he did. After the meal, Wilson climbed in the back of Strickland's motorcycle and he drove her through Austin's eclectic east side to a garage apartment, where she was staying with a friend, Caitlin Cash. Strickland drove up an alley parallel to the street, dropped Wilson off outside the apartment, and continued up the alley toward the home. Wilson walked up the wooden staircase leading to the apartment's entrance, and used a code to unlock the door. Cash was at dinner with a friend, and an app on her phone notified her that the door had been unlocked. It was 8:36, dark by then. Around the same time, a neighbor's security system camera captured the footage of a black SUV with chrome around the windows, bike storage on the back of the luggage rack on the roof, pulling through the driveway that connects Maple Avenue to the alley. The video shows the SUV brake lights come to a slow next to Cash's place. Cash arrived home at 10 p.m. The apartment was unlocked. Cash entered, looked around, and soon found Wilson on the bathroom floor, surrounded in her own pool of blood. You remember that gun I told you all about earlier and the bullets? Well, 3 bullet casings marked by a 9mm jag were on the floor next to her body, which was facing up. Wilson had lacerations on her right index finger and another beneath her chin. She'd been shot twice in the head. A third bullet entered her chest, exited her back, and CSIs who arrived soon after Cash discovered Wilson would find the third bullet lodged in a crack of towel beneath her. Someone had stood over her, fired toward her. Wilson was a 25-year-old pro cyclist who was in Austin for the Gravel Locust bike race, where she was murdered. So the murder of Moriah Wilson didn't become public until Saturday, 3 days after her death. In that afternoon, the Austin Police Department, which immediately announced that the violent crime had occurred on Maple Avenue. But the police disclosed the victim's name, did not disclose her name. So, they issued a press release stating that Wilson had been killed, that the shooting did not appear to be a random act, and that a person of interest had been identified. In a quiet conversation and rapidly multiplying text threads, rumors swirled in the national gravel scene of Austin's cyclist community, my community. The emerging theory that a love triangle involving Strickland, Armstrong, and Wilson had led to Wilson's murder. It seemed so salacious to be true. But over the next week, as panicked friends exchanged information, and that information made its way to Austin's detectives, the idea that Armstrong had shot Wilson began. Many to feel more plausible. Security footage placed the SUV, which appeared to be identical to Armstrong's, at the site of the murder, and almost exactly the time concluded it took place. Police also recovered the Sig Sauer P365 from Strickland's home. The department of ballistics experts fired a weapon, used a microscope, and compared the markings on the shell with those found at the crime scene. In the ballistics report, the expert wrote that the shell casings found at the murder scene were positively identified as having been fired by the Sig Sauer P-365. Now, there were some troubling conversations Armstrong allegedly had with some friends in January. After she had gotten back from a party, back together with Strickland, she was talking with Jacqueline Chastain at a party at a cafe called the Meteor in Bentonville, Arkansas. Chastain was friends with both Armstrong and Strickland, and she felt that Strickland didn't always treat Armstrong the way she deserved, and she would say, "Dump him." She told Armstrong more than once in Bentonville that Armstrong explained to her that she and Strickland were in a better place now. She divulged, however, that he had a fling with Wilson, and that really bothered her. Armstrong said that she thought Wilson had been aggressive in her pursuit with Strickland and that she would not leave him. So, alright. She would not leave him alone. Chastain noticed her friend trembling with emotion. Armstrong allegedly told Chastain that I wanted to kill her. A little alarmed, Chastain expressed to Armstrong that she didn't mean that. To the people feel and say all kinds of things where they've been hurt. No, I really wanted to kill her, Armstrong would go on to tell her. Armstrong confided in Chastain that she recently got a gun. Anyway, it was what Chastain thought she heard. It was loud inside the cafe, and they had a couple of drinks, and she definitely heard Armstrong say something about a gun. Either that or she bought one or was about to. And at this time, the gravity of Armstrong's remark didn't quite register. Everyone knew her as a caring, compassionate person full of light heart, light and talent, and that was not so different from Wilson. Nobody believed Armstrong could ever hurt someone. Later, when Chastain's husband Andy told her about Wilson's murder, she nearly broke down in tears. It was Caitlin, she told him. She phoned the police an anonymous tip which helped them obtain an arrest warrant. Initially, the Austin police considered Strickland a suspect in Wilson's case, but video evidence showed him riding his motorcycle along the interstate I-35 at 8:48. Because Strickland was 8 miles from the scene of the crime and just 12 minutes after dropping Wilson off. The police consider his story very credible. And detectives also interviewed Armstrong. And on May 12th, the day after Wilson's murder, they arrested her in an outstanding warrant of a misdemeanor charge during 2018. While in custody, they questioned her about the murder, but Armstrong didn't say much during the interview, and the police let her go. So by Tuesday, May 17th, 6 days after Wilson's death, they thought they had enough to make an arrest and began looking for her again. But it was too late. She was gone. So, let's go jump into part two, shall we? It's complicated. A fit young woman, Caitlin Armstrong, who was 35, she was accused of standing a young woman, Moriah Wilson. I almost said Anna Maria. Anyway. She was one of the best bike racers in America, and in effect to help the public understand how the violence like this could be between two different people. The Austin police have crafted a narrative around the murder. They believe two women both wanted the same man, Colin Strickland, a longtime friend from the Austin cycling scene. The police have portrayed Strickland as a nice guy who cheated on his girlfriend with a young woman. Many people would have said that he's at least partly to blame for the crime. A serious thing to say, right? Well, before news spread of his official involvement in the case. I sent a story to as a there was a story as a journalist. There was a story that was done. It was following the facts where they led. It was following the facts and disclosing all of the reportings of the outside editorial team. To put this mildly, people have been obsessed with this case. I know I have, right? And this was reported around the world. A quick Google search could turn up tens of thousands of stories. TikTok videos related to Caitlin Armstrong have gotten 100 million views. Gun violence involving people of color, who often dismissed as a gang or drug related, and violent crimes somebody like Wilson and the world couldn't turn away. And I think 2020 also was the year with Gabby, like 2020, 2021, all of that was around the same year with Gabby Petito. And look at the discussions of the case happening online. It is clear plenty of people wanted to know whether Strickland was a bad boyfriend. They also wanted to know if was he such a bad boyfriend that he was bear some responsibility. The reasoning was that his behavior led Armstrong into some serious jealous rage of Moriah Wilson. People who feel like they have filled Strickland's Instagram comments with murder, it's your fault. And at one point, he publicly disclosed that he suffered from suicide thoughts in the wake of Wilson's murder. Words hurt people, just saying. But Pete Stetina, one of Strickland's competitors at Rebecca's Private, Idaho, says the gravel racing is known for the culture of mutual support, and that Strickland's behavior toward Wilson was consistent with that. He was super friendly, and he liked her business of the cycle world. He also said that he would always open book in terms of what he was doing, and he helped a lot of riders, including Moriah. So, yeah. A month later, Strickland and Moriah reconnected at Big Sugar, a 103-mile gravel race that started at the end of Bentonville. Strickland finished ninth. Wilson won the women's race and finished 12th overall, just 5 minutes behind Strickland. That weekend, Strickland went on a group trip to Bentonville and flowing. The two women who helped manage the high school mountain group bike league in the area. Everyone in the group had accomplished her. Although Armstrong came to Bentonville, Strickland didn't invite her on the ride. She became a strong road and gravel cyclist, but he figured she wouldn't have the trail skills to keep up. That happened a lot in the cycling world. So, especially when rides like this one was partly about business. Yet no one likes to be excluded, and it was possible that snub led Armstrong to female pros like Wilson as potential rivals. On a 9-hour drive back to Austin, she and Strickland had a long, intense conversation over their friendship. Strickland told her that she wasn't the partner she deserved. He wasn't the partner that she deserved. He didn't know if he could be more. He could be. Ever since they started dating 2 years before, he struggled to fully commit. But more than once, he thought about breaking up. And he didn't follow through. But now he did, and this time they reached a ranch-style home in South Austin, where they've officially split. So, back in June of 2019, when Strickland beat a bunch of Tour de France pros at the Unbound and instantly became one of the most prominent athletes in the cycling world, he was stoked, and he became one of the best racers on the scene. A couple of times, Strickland would offer advice at some pro cycling dilemma he was facing. So when Strickland was willing and struggling, he'd send him a text or on Instagram message of support essentially saying, keep going. On May 11th, so It was so Strickland headed on his motorcycle on May 11 with the intention of picking up Wilson for a romantic liaison. When he invited her to go swimming, he didn't consider that there would be a lot of people that might view this decision as inappropriate, especially if you're in a committed relationship and your partner doesn't know what you're up to. But Strickland views the world differently. And most people, I don't know what. Okay, I was goofing off my headphones there for a second. I don't know what happened. Anyway, he knew that he and Wilson were just friends at that point, and he had no intention of cheating on Armstrong. But he also should have known that lying to Armstrong about connecting with Wilson was a bad idea, right? That would have been common sense on his part. Should have been. But in 2019, back before Strickland met Armstrong, he often worried about emotional attachment could be counterproductive to his cycling ambitions. But that year, following the most successful racing season, he felt a renewed urgency to meet somebody he could be serious about. He downloaded the dating app Hinge for touts of which touts itself against anti-Tinder geared singles toward connection instead of casual hookups. In 2019, he found Armstrong. They met for a glass of wine at a meter in South Congress, then went for a stroll along the boardwalk beside Lady Bird Park, while the Austin skyline of sparkling water. Though Armstrong he saw Armstrong as sweet and intelligent, and certainly thought she was attractive. He didn't sense an immediate romantic connection. Superficially, they seemed different. She didn't share his eclectic interest in music and art. He brought quality goods and repaired his own clothing. She didn't mind shopping at cheap chain stores. He grew up on an organic farm and thought deeply about food. She didn't really cook. He went to a hippie-style Waldorf school, and she grew up in Livonia, a middle-class suburb in Detroit. During the first few months they dated, Strickland considered breaking it off before things got too far, but Armstrong's kindness, patience, and positivity kept him from cutting ties. The pandemic would then hit. The races would be canceled, travel stopped. Strickland and Armstrong spent more time and they grew together and grew as a couple. He introduced her to cycling and she developed a passion for the sport. Soon she was strong enough to draft him in to a long training ride, and she also supported him however she could. During the pandemic, for example, she was spent 5 days on the phone helping Strickland's mom access to unemployment benefits, and that made him realize that a person's heart was more than the music they listened to. In February 2021, an ice storm struck Texas. The pipes in Armstrong's apartment burst, making the place uninhabitable. Armstrong stayed with Strickland while the repairs were made. When she asked about living together, he was hesitant. For half a year, every year, his mom would live with him in their 4-bedroom home. More importantly, he was worried about the emotional dependency that living with Armstrong would create for both of them. And around the same time, as Armstrong was working to get her real estate license, she began investing in property. Strickland and Armstrong bought a house together in Lockhart, a small town in Austin, and then Armstrong bought 2 homes in South Austin, including one in Strickland's neighborhood. They also were planning renovations to that house, including one in Strickland's neighborhood. They also were planning some renovations to that house and a custom steel fence that Armstrong had installed. Her goal was to move into the place once the renovations were done, in 6 months or so. But more than a year after Armstrong had moved in with Strickland, they were living together. Ooh. Excuse me, guys, I'm sorry. They also found a business, Wheelhouse Mobile, that involved restoring and selling Spartan trailers. Armstrong became an agent for Sotheby's, where they could sell the trailers as far as $350,000 each. Seemingly without thinking about it, almost every element of their lives became intertwined. She managed the Wheelhouse Mobile and large extent of the racing finances, and she had access to most of the phone and computer passwords. So, people like Armstrong and Strickland, but they had a lot of mutual friends that said that their relationship seemed messy. Some of Strickland's friends thought Armstrong had become too attached to his public persona. One example of this would be prior to the group ride in Austin, Strickland's clothing sponsor, Rafa, had him look into an exclusive cycling kit with all sponsor logos. He ordered one for Armstrong too as a gift, but then asked not to wear it at public events. He thought it would be improper, that his sponsors might not like it. So the morning of the ride, when Armstrong came out dressed in a kit, Strickland asked her to change. So, this shocked her, right? Armstrong decided to skip the ride entirely. Armstrong's side of the ledger, friends of both her and Strickland's have witnessed him speak rudely to her, to a degree that compelled him to call her out on it. One of his bike industries, Andy Chastain, talked about this, and he said, "I hate to speak badly about anyone, but Strickland could be extremely condescending to people he knows and he's close to." Chastain had seen it happen with one of Strickland's male teammates, and with his own mom, probably the most person in the closet. Chris Tolley, a friend who knew Armstrong and Strickland, showed a theory about why she put up with his rude behavior. Tolley said that he and Armstrong grew up in the homes of alcoholic parents. Then in late October, a few days after he ended things with Armstrong, Strickland got a message from Wilson that she was coming to Austin to hang out with friends for a week and work remotely, and did he want to catch up? Wilson grew up in East Burke in Vermont, Northeast Kingdom, an unspoiled corner of the state, bounded by the Connecticut River and the Canadian border. In the 1970s, her father's Eric Wilson competed in the World Cup circuit and a member of the U.S. ski team. After he stopped racing internationally, he got a job as a Burke Mountain Academy, an elite boarding school established in 1970, and the goal of his developing top alpine ski race. Wilson and her younger brother Matthew attended both the race downhill. Two-time Olympic gold medalist Michaela Schriffen graduated in 2013, a year ahead of Wilson. Wilson had dreamed of ski racing, but her talents and interests extended beyond the slopes. Her parents had both started mountain biking in the 80s, shortly after the sport emerged. And by age of 7, she was hiking the area's abundant network of single tracks. The world-renowned Kingdom Trail circled the hometown, like a personal playground. In addition to skiing, she wrote a letter and cycling in the soccer at Burke from an early age, and she exhibited her professionalism. Sometimes it overwhelmed her. In middle school, her parents found her a therapist that could help her manage for her determined personality. And after graduating from Burke in 2014, she took a year off from school to focus on skiing. But she just realized that wasn't there. But she set back to whenever she tore an ACL for a second time. And during her recovery from her knee surgery, she rode bikes regularly, and for the first time she considered giving up skiing to pursue cycling more seriously. In her short term, she kept racing, and she skied for Dartmouth and getting an engineering degree. During her senior year, Wilson heard about an emerging discipline of gravel racing, and she volunteered for an event in her hometown, Rasputitsa, and it involved 100 kilometers of the Northeast Kingdom's steep inclines. Watching top pros finish the race, covered in mud and completely cracked, Wilson felt inspired. After graduating in 2009, she told her parents that she wanted to pursue bike racing professionally. They helped her find a coach, Neil Burton, who helped her with a series of physical tests, and the tests showed that the power outfit was a world class of her potential, showed her a potential. That summer, her boyfriend at the time, Gunnar Shaw, moved to the Bay Area when she took a job with Specialized. They bought a van, traveled to events up and down the coast, and Barton suggested that she try cyclocross, which she did in the late 2019. And at the national championship in Lakewood, Washington, starting on the back row, she worked her way up to finish 26. I don't know more about racing, but that sounds pretty good for a beginner, I guess. So, when the bike racing went on hold during the pandemic, she found that working from home gave her more time to train and kept getting better. In November 2020, she headed off to the proving ground for American endurance bike racers, Moab's Right Rim Trail, a 100-mile loop through the canyons of Colorado and Green Rivers. Completely self-supported, carrying only an hydration pack of the two waters, she completed the loop in her under 7 hours, setting a new fastest time for women and establishing herself as a rider heading into 2021. She cherished the friendly and supportive vibe from the U.S. gravel racing community. In 2021, she competed for Specialized alongside Unbound winner Allison Tetrick. And she was going to say that her heart became full watching Moriah realize her strength. So Wilson was so driven that Tetrick sometimes had to remind her just to enjoy the ride. So once during a training ride near Tetrick's home in Pelima, California, she noticed Wilson coughing and says, "You gotta take it easy." They sat down, split a beer, and she felt better. Strickland, for this part of Wilson, underwent business in the gravel racing. He was both impressive and sweet, and Wilson learned that she arrived in Austin October 2021, newly single. She had broken up with Shaw. It was no surprise she was interested. So, the first week Wilson came to Austin, she and Strickland hung out on Thursday night, called the Drive Race Series, a social scene with free beer, with hundreds of cyclists getting together, handlers, and roughly around the mile long course. Armstrong was a regular at the event. It occurred to Strickland that if Armstrong saw him in public with Wilson, that it might cause resentment. After the race, when Wilson and some of her friends went to the Meteor, where Armstrong was going to be that night, Strickland went home. He knew it would be insensitive to be seen by Armstrong, so, what he could be perceived as a date. The two of them was still working on cutting ties. Armstrong was looking for an apartment, which wouldn't be easy to find in Austin, and was still living with Strickland in the meantime. Though she had a separate room, the renovations on the house were coming along, so she could move there soon. Meanwhile, Armstrong told Strickland that she didn't want to be part of the Wheelhouse Mobile anymore. He said he wished that she would stay on, but understood. During the first week of November 2021, Strickland and Wilson drove to West Texas, where they went on for 3 long rides with a small group. Inside, Armstrong too decided to get away to clear his head. She booked a trip to a beach town in Mexico. Strickland didn't seem to fully take in how much of a fling with Wilson was hurting Armstrong. But Armstrong's younger sister Christy, who lived in Austin, saw the pain. Around this time, Wilson came to Austin. Christy sent him a text to Chris Tolley saying, "Who does Colin think he is, breaking up with Caitlin and then seeing this girl from Instagram?" Tolley understands why Armstrong was upset. I mean, who wouldn't be? And he says, like your ex-boyfriend of a week is seeing some cyclist that you have a problem with in Austin own your home turf in front of everyone. Everyone saw it. So, not long after, Armstrong got Wilson's number and called her, warning her to stay away from Strickland. In the arrest affidavit issuing for Armstrong for May 17, 2022, a friend of Wilson's who went on by a pseudonym Jane stated that Armstrong called Wilson many times, but Wilson eventually blocked her. Armstrong's attempt to contact Wilson between her and Strickland isn't clear. But in an interview with Austin police detectives after Austin murders, Strickland and Wilson told him that she got a weird phone call from Armstrong. Over the holidays, in the late 2001 and in 2002, Strickland and Armstrong started to reconnect. Armstrong didn't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving, so he invited her to dinner at a friend's house. The group liked Armstrong. Did like Armstrong. Can't talk for some reason. Strickland's friends were always happy to have her around. At the end of January, Armstrong and Strickland went back to Bentonville to attend a nearby cyclocross world championship. Strickland had become the sponsor of the events to go to Armstrong, who had reconsidered her involvement with the Wheelhouse Mobile. Wheelhouse Mobile came to participate in the business and in the company, and she went because she loved bikes. She was also stoked about watching races and seeing friends from the cycling community. At the time, Strickland still considered himself single. He was in a relationship limbo, trying to figure out if he wanted a life partner. To friends who asked about Armstrong, Strickland formally said, "We are not together." So, Wilson was in Bentonville too. She and Strickland shared a few sponsors, and she found herself at the same events as Strickland and Armstrong. The situation was awkward for everyone, I bet. And at one point, all three were seated together at the same dinner, with Strickland was in the middle, and Armstrong and Wilson were at either side. Even if they weren't back together, it was clear that Armstrong remained emotionally invested in Strickland. It was also that weekend that at Meter in Bentonville that she allegedly told her friend Jacqueline she wanted to kill Wilson. According to the police around her at the time of the trip, Armstrong went on to a shooting range with her sister and practiced with the pistol. The events in Arkansas left Wilson feeling confused, and she sent Wilson a long text saying, "Hey, so I would like to talk to you at some point," she wrote. "This weekend was strange for me, and I just wanted to know what's going on. If you just want to be friends, seems to be the case, then that's cool, but I like to talk about it, because honestly my mind has been going through circles, and I don't know what to think." He even apologized for the confusion, but didn't set the record straight about their status. Over the course of the spring, however, he would resume his relationship with Armstrong. And Strickland maintains that he had reset his relationship with Wilson as friends. Though they're professional cyclists, Strickland and Wilson were often at each other's races during the spring season and post-race parties. My nose itches. In May of 2022, that was just random that I said my nose itches, but anyway, I don't know why my nose itches. Anyway, in March of 2022, after they finished the Mid-South gravel race in Stillwater, Oklahoma, they got together at a bar in the Riders of Industries Bros, drinking beer until midnight. At some point, they heard the race last finishers were coming in. Strickland, Wilson, and pro Pete Sestina hustled over to the finish line to cheer them in. Wilson, who had placed second in the Mid-South, would later recount celebrating the moment in her newsletter. Writing about the last female finisher, she said it was dark, it was cold, and she had been out there for 14.5 hours. What an incredible display of strength and perseverance. Watching this woman cross the line with dozens of others cheering her on. On Wednesday, May 11th, the day Wilson was murdered, Strickland and Armstrong started their morning by riding bikes at Meir in South Congress. Strickland had made plans to meet his friend Bob Kaplos, a fellow gravel racer, a 4-hour training ride. Armstrong accompanied them for the ride, but on the hill, just a few miles outside of town, she couldn't hold the pace. Strickland told Kaplos that they didn't wait and that she wouldn't expect them to. They kept going. The dynamic of Strickland's profession to the bike racing and Armstrong's passion for the sport sometimes led to arguments. And after she got back from riding, Armstrong texted Strickland to let her know that she had gotten an email from the lawyer, and asking, "Do you want to go over this?" she asked. And it was later that day that Strickland was at the dentist, and he never responded. The day before, when Wilson reached out to let Strickland know she was coming to Austin, he decided to delete the old thread with her and change her name in his phone contacts. He thought that concealing these things from Armstrong would help avoid conflict. What he didn't take into account was that his text messages also showed up on his laptop, which usually sat on the kitchen table. Armstrong had the password. So, after Strickland and Wilson left the pool and had dinner, he drove back to Caitlin Cash's apartment and said goodbye. The plan was to see each other the next day at dinner and for racing and gravel locos. On the way home, Strickland sent Armstrong a text. "Hey, are you up?" He wrote, "I went to drop some flowers off at Allison at her son's house up north and my phone died. Heading there now. Food suggestions?" And flowers were slang for cannabis. And the errand was, of course, a fabrication. Armstrong got home around 9:20 when she found Strickland in the garage setting up new wheels to use on his bike. And she was wearing yoga clothes and carried a yoga mat, and she didn't ask where he'd been and didn't mention that she had been trying to get in touch with him. So, let's move on to part 5 of this now, shall we? Well, the next morning, Austin detectives Richard Spittler and Jason Ayer surveyed the Strickland's home from the unmarked car. They took note of the vehicle in the driveway, including the B&W motorcycle, Armstrong's black Jeep, noting its chrome bike storage and luggage rack that appeared to match the vehicle at the murder scene. When they saw Strickland exit the home, they approached him after they knew a woman named Anna Wilson. The use of her first name threw him off, and he said he didn't. When they tried again, he this time said Moriah, her middle name. Strickland understood immediately and said yes, he knew her. The detectives told Strickland that Wilson had been found dead, had been killed, and he was stunned in the realization that one of the last people to saw him alive hung over him. He agreed to go downtown and tell detectives what he knew. Lance Tyndall, a commercial real estate agent and recreational recyclist, got a text from Strickland around 8 a.m. And the morning after her thing, Tyndall had been trying to connect with Strickland to buy some used wheels, and Strickland suggested that they come before 10. Driving up the driveway, Tyndall noticed a police car and saw Strickland pulling out of the driveway. Strickland saw Tyndall reverse and move in direction and scroll down his window. He told him, "Hey, I've got to go to the police station. One of my friends died last night, and the two of us had gone swimming." And he would go and ask like a homicide? He's like, "Yeah." Strickland looked angry. It sounds like she was murdered, Strickland told Tyndall at the wheel, and inside was Armstrong knew he was coming. Shaken, Tyndall walked up to the front door where Armstrong greeted him. They started talking about the murder, and she told that Moriah Wilson was the victim. As Armstrong talked, she began removing the extra parts from the wheel set Tyndall was buying. She explained to him that Wilson was a phenom who won big races in California, including the Sea Otter Mountain bike race in Monterey and the Belgium Waffle ride, a tough ride in San Diego, and that she had taken by an astounding 25 minutes. So maybe Tyndall said, noting that the homicide had increased in the country, and said yes. Armstrong excused herself to go to the bathroom. She had removed everything but the tire from one wheel. Tyndall tried to get it off but couldn't. Feeling a bit odd about the situation, he waited about 10 minutes until Armstrong came out. When she emerged, he removed the tire and Tyndall left. He told police that it would later occur to him how did Armstrong know the area where Wilson had been murdered. He knew that he and Wilson were just friends at one point, when they had no intention of cheating on Armstrong, but she should have known by lying to Armstrong about connecting with Wilson was a terrible idea. So downtown at the police headquarters, detectives led Strickland to a small room in the padded wall. He said he was free to leave at any time. They talked to him for about an hour, and he told him about the relationship with Armstrong and Wilson, and the details that he had spent with Wilson the previous day. Leaving Strickland alone for what seemed like an hour, he sat at the desk, tightly wedging his long frame into the corner of the room. He covered his head with his arms and pulled his seat, emerging from the sill. When the detectives came back, they told Strickland about the surveillance footage and how Armstrong's vehicle appeared to be outside the apartment. Wilson had entered around the time, and she was killed. Strickland was shocked at the potential connection of his girlfriend to Wilson's murder. Throughout the interview, in the second one during May 17th, with Strickland's lawyer present, detectives asked, "Do you think Armstrong is capable of doing something like this?" Later, when Spittler left the room to take a call, Strickland's lawyer, Claire Corder, asked, "Is there something you didn't say last time that you don't feel like you got to say?" Exhausted by what he saw at the police department's attempt to get him to implicate Armstrong, he bluntly said, "I have nothing to say. F you guys are manipulating me." Next day, after Wilson's murders, as the detectives were interviewing Strickland's downtown, Austin's police officers searched the home, taking his and Armstrong's pistols along with Armstrong's phone. They then arrested Armstrong on the charge, oddly, that had no connection to the murder. In March 2018, Armstrong got a Botox treatment in a medical spa in South Austin. Cost her $653. When it came time to pay, according to the misdemeanor warrant, she pulled out her MasterCard with a name on it. And then she wanted to use a different card, and she left it in her car. She put the MasterCard on the counter, went out to her car, and never came back. She was later charged with theft of service, and she had never been arrested on the charge until now, more than 4 years later after the warrant. And here's the thing about that warrant. It's like they had to let her go because there was an era that had gone. So, not long after we're going to move on to number 6 now. Not long after Armstrong came back from getting coffee on May 13th, she drove a Jeep to CarMax, a mile from Strickland's home, on the I-35 frontage road, where she sold it for $12,200. It's unclear where she stayed on Friday night, but by Saturday morning, she was at Austin-Bergensen International Airport wearing white pants, a blue jacket, and a black protective mask. 2 months earlier, Armstrong's sister, Christy, had moved to a private campground and wellness retreat in New York called Camp Haven. Someone there at the campground told tabloids that they seen Armstrong with Christie, a fact that investigators have not confirmed. On Tuesday, May 17th, Armstrong police got the results from the ballistics that they formed on Armstrong's gun, and they issued a warrant for her arrest. However, she had escaped to Costa Rica. She stole her sister's passport and went to Costa Rica. So in Costa Rica, she dyed her hair, she cut it short, and went out by the name Ari. Though police believe she used at least one other alias, she checked in at a hostel in Santa Teresa, a beach town known for its world-class yoga and burgeoning surf scene. Make friends with locals and teach a yoga class. Of all the places to escape to, Santa Teresa, which sits on the Nicoya Peninsula, one of the country's Pacific coast. To get there, you have to drive at least 90 minutes from the capital, San Jose, take a ferry another 90 minutes to the Gulf of Nicoya, and then drive for a more 90-minute stretch in the peninsula. So, and Santa Teresa had a reputation of a low-key outlaw post. So it wasn't, so definitely you could tell like it was thought of. If I go off the grid, that means, I could. So in late June, a little month after she became a fugitive, she took 2 buses and a ferry to San Jose. And she went on to a clinic where she got a nose job. So, the day of the judgment. So, during a pretrial hearing on the 403rd District Court for Travis County, chains linked her ankles and bailiffs, her hair bad and regained an auburn color. She wore it as part of the side captured. Y'all, when I tell you that I was so glad that she was found guilty for serving her crime, because one, what person runs away if you're innocent? Like, seriously. But thank y'all for listening. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day, and I hope y'all have a fabulous Christmas. Also, go check that merch shop out if you've been here.